what to expect. That's why it's so important to have something we can count on, and that is Europe. That's why I wish Denmark a strong and very successful presidency. Our first goal is to put maximum pressure on Russia to stop this war. This pressure means building up our defense and keeping tough sanctions on Russia. And we are working hard on both. I thank Denmark and the vast majority of EU countries, as well as the European institutions. Thank you, Antonio. Thank you, Ursula, for your support. We expect a strong 18th package of EU sanctions and full coordination of these sanctions across key global jurisdictions. We also discussed defense funding today, and it's very important that support remains predictable. There is also clear progress in joint weapons production, and this is not only about the very good Danish model of investing in Ukraine. We are also preparing agreements for joint production in Denmark. Of course, we expect Ukraine to be a full partner in European programs like SAFE, and we must continue directing the profits from frozen Russian assets to support our defense, including by investing those funds in Ukraine's defense industry. The second priority is EU enlargement. In today's global competition, being part of the EU helps every such nation succeed. Ukraine has already done everything required to start accession talks, including being ready to open the first cluster, fundamentals, and we will be ready for the other clusters later this year. It's time to open the clusters, and the third goal is coordination. Now, when there are doubts about continued US support for Europe, it's even more important to strengthen our cooperation and coordination through the EU, NATO, and also in our direct relations, both with each other in Europe and with the United States. Thank you to everyone who's helping with finding common solutions. Mette, I wish you success, and thank you so much. Again, thank you and all of Denmark for everything. Slava Ukraine.
Thank you, and then I would like to pass the floor to the President of the European Council, Antonio.
Thank you, Mette, dear Volodymyr, dear Ursula. It's a pleasure to be here in Aarhus to launch the Danish presidency of the Council. And let me start for wish to you, Mette, all the best for this presidency. Denmark has shown unwavering support to Ukraine from day one. And you personally have set an example for a strong leadership in Europe and to the world. And as you rightly said, Ukraine's fight for freedom is also our fight for freedom. First, Russian invasion of Ukraine remains a major threat to global peace in the world, because this invasion is undermining the international rules-based order, because Russia is an intercontinental country threatening not only Europe but also the Pacific region, and because Russia is acting in a coalition with countries like North Korea or Iran. Second, a just and lasting peace is urgent global security. I'm deeply disappointed that Russia is not engaging with the efforts of President Trump to achieve a just and lasting peace. While President Zelensky has already agreed on an unconditional ceasefire, Russia not only hasn't agreed, but even increasing the intensity of their aggression to Ukraine. From our part, we will continue to give full support to Ukraine. Member States have committed an additional 24 billion military support since the beginning of this year, and now the European Commission offered to all Member States more fiscal space to increase their support, and this support counts for the new NATO targets. And we will continue, on the other hand, to put pressure on Russia through sanctions. Last week, we prolonged all our sanctions for another 6 months, and the 18th package of sanctions is underway. Finally, we are looking forward to our common future, with Ukraine as a full member of the European Union. And I'm very happy with the recent assessment of the European Commission about your impressive work to deliver on reforms in such difficult situations, and for sure we have reached the conditions to move forward the ongoing negotiation process to the accession to the European Union.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Antonio. And now President of the European Commission, Ursula.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mette, and a very warm welcome also to you, Volodymyr, and to you, Antonio. Mette, I want to thank you for your constant support to Ukraine, and I'm sure that under your leadership, this support will continue. I also want to mention, first of all, the sanctions. As you know, last week we agreed to renew our sanctions. And as a first achievement of your presidency, Mette, you can bring the 18th package to the finish line. I'm confident that this will be possible. We all know that Putin does not want peace, so we need to put pressure on him to come to the negotiation table. 18 sanctions packages are biting at the heart of Russia's war economy. It was an eye-opener to hear the Russian Minister of Economic Development saying Russia is on the brink of recession. The interest rate is at 20%, inflation is at 10%. Russia's overheated war economy is coming to its limits. So for us, it is important to increase the pressure so that he comes to the negotiation table. My second point is on defense. We will deliver 2 million shells to Ukraine by the end of the year. We also invested 2.1 billion euros to strengthen Ukraine's defense right now. And important is the origin of this money. We are doing this by using the windfall profits from immobilized Russian assets. So in practice, Russia is paying for the weapons Ukraine is using. But Ukraine needs more. And for that, we have SAFE. SAFE for joint procurement. This money can be taken by member states and be invested in the Ukrainian defense industry. It will strengthen the defense industry. The products are better, more intelligent, cheaper, and come faster. So it's to our benefit too. And it will increase the income not only of the defense industry, but of course then of the government of Ukraine too. I think important is also that there is still spare capacity in the Ukrainian defense industry, so it's worth to invest in it. Important is member states can join SAFE, Ukraine can also join SAFE. Finally, a bilateral issue on trade flows for agricultural products. The good news is that we have found an agreement with Ukraine. It will provide long-term and predictable trade relationship on agricultural products. And in addition, we are giving long-term economic certainty through the Ukraine facility and the G7 loan. We want to gradually bring Ukraine into our single market. A good example is that we are ending roaming charges as of next year, also to bring our people closer together. We are working hard on your accession process. We're preparing for your future as a free and modern country inside the European Union.
And we'll leave for questions. Let's start with Inter TV.
Hello, Inter TV channel, Ukraine. My name is Nina Kolomiyets. The first part of my questions is to President Volodymyr Zelensky. Mr. President, the US State Department has confirmed suspension of certain categories of weapon supplies to Ukraine. What details have been clarified? Which types of weaponry are currently on hold? What are the reasons behind this pause? And how do you assess the outlook for continuous military assistance to Ukraine? And the second part of my question is to European leaders and our partners. In light of this pause in US arms deliveries, Is Europe prepared to partially or fully fill the gap? Which countries are ready to respond in what quantities and over what time frame can this support be mobilized? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. So, first of all, of course, we count on continuation of American support, but there are some items which Europe, it's a pity, but which Europe doesn't have for today, especially when we speak about PAC-3. I mean that missiles for Patriot systems. This is crucial, yes, and also when we speak about systems. But we count also on our Ukrainian production. We need more financing, more funds for this. We spoke about it today also, and we have, God bless, we have really good relations, and we count on EU, on Denmark, and on our relationships, and we have really some very important programs which mentioned Madam President already, and I think it were very helpful. What about our bilateral relations with the United States and this support? So I hope that maybe tomorrow or in close days, these days, I will speak about it with the President Trump.
If I can add some few words, I think what is necessary to say to all good partners is that the war in Ukraine has never only been about Ukraine, it's about Europe. And therefore, if we are to protect Ukraine and Europe and the transatlantic alliance, we have to ensure that Ukraine gets the help that you need. So, of course, all of us hope that US will continue their support for Ukraine and, because of Ukraine, for Europe. But if there are any gaps, then I personally believe that we should be willing to fill in. And I was almost saying I'm happy, but that's not the right word to use because there's a war going on in Europe. But I'm quite proud of the cooperation we have when it comes to supporting production directly in Ukraine. It's working because of you and your companies. But I would like to put this message on the table also to the rest of the European leaders that you have more capacity than we have financing. So you will be able to produce more also on very critical capabilities in Ukraine if we are able to find more financing. So I think that could be the next step for Europe.
Can I compliment?
Yes, of course.
I think it's very important to spread the message to our member states that now financial possibilities are there to support directly Ukraine. On one hand, there is a national escape clause. So this gives national fiscal flexibility to invest in defense capabilities, which can go also to Ukraine. Then there is the safe joint procurement. And here, very important, they can directly invest in the Ukrainian defense industry. And as you said, defense industry has still capacities. Important is this pays into the NATO target. So it's a triple win for the member states if they do these investments for their own security, for Ukraine's security, and for their NATO target.
Please.
Just to add that since the beginning of this year, the member states have already supported on military capabilities with 24 billion euros. Now they can do more. But stress that this is not only about Ukraine and about Europe. This is, in fact, about international law. Because Russia aggression on Ukraine is violating the international law. Sovereignty, territorial integrity, international recognized borders, and this is a threat for the global security. And it's the reason because the support Ukraine needs to engage all of the countries who are supporting international law.
Please.
News agency Ritzau. Yeah. Mr. Zelensky, we see specific countries blocking the Ukrainian way into the European Union. How crucial is it for Ukraine to get any progress on becoming a member state of the European Union during the next 6 months where Denmark holds the presidency? And Mette Frederiksen, how do you plan as presidency to get around these specific countries blocking for Ukrainian acceptance?
Thank you so much. From our side, we do our best during the war, really. And I want to thank all our people, the government, parliamentarians, and society which support all these laws, reforms, what we needed very much to open clusters. Yes, and during the war it's very difficult, it's really tough situation, you understand, because of security. Even sometimes, we spoke about it, sometimes it's just difficult to be together in one building, all the government and parliamentarians, because of the attacks. I mean, and they have to provide reforms anyway. And we are on this way. We stood on this way, and we want to go further forward to be a member of EU. That's why we need support. And I think nobody can stop Ukraine in this way, any one country. And of course, it depends on unity in EU, such decisions. So from our side, we will do everything. And we need support from all other leaders in EU. You know, such countries which are, this is a sensitive question, I think, but in any way, at the end of the day, in any way, we will manage it.
Can I just ask you?
Oh, sorry, no. Anas, please.
Can I ask
Please. Anas, please. Prime Minister, please.
one question?
I was just going to put an answer to Ritzau. First of all, for us it's very clear that Ukraine belongs to not only the European family when it comes to the European Union, but also the transatlantic alliance when it comes to NATO. But for now, enlargement of the European Union is crucial. Volodymyr has already spoken about how important it is for Ukraine, and I would like to add for the rest of Europe as well, because it will bring stability to the European continent, having Ukraine as a member. The concrete steps, I can't share that with you yet. Of course, we are thinking about what is the best way forward. It's my feeling that the vast majority of the member states are in favor of a Ukrainian membership of the European Union, because Europeans know that a secure Ukraine means a more secure Europe. But the concrete steps, it's a bit too early to say anything about them. Sorry.
And we'll do Land Vanguardia, please.
Hi, it's Anna Buch from La Vanguardia. To President Costa, after in the European Council, the 27 member states agreed to boost defense spending. They agreed also in NATO. But my question is, will they still be able to do it at the same time on filling the gap if the pause from the US delivery is permanent? And to President Zelensky, what do you expect of the call between President Trump and President Putin? Thank you.
What we decided in the European Council is to add efficiency and to ensure that the member states could spend better by standardization, by interoperability, by demand aggregation, by joint procurements, by common projects. And this is a great contribution to help all member states to deliver on this. The Commission have presented a package with the escape clause, more the safe, to create more fiscal room. And, very, very important, each euro spent by the member states supporting Ukraine could be account to the 3.5% or the 5% to on NATO. Then we are not creating a difficulty, but is €1 could be used at the same time to Ukraine, to European defense and your own defense.
Thank you. We will answer.
About that dialogue between phone call between Trump and Putin. I don't know. I'm not sure that they have a lot of common ideas, common topics to talk, because they are very different people. But if we speak about Ukraine, we supported from the very beginning the idea of President Trump, unconditional ceasefire. I said it not once that we are ready for any kind of format of meeting. And I think that in Russia only Putin real decision makers. That's why we need meeting on the level of leaders if we really want peace.
And answer, please.
Ляйен and Costa, for their point of view, the veto of one member state on Ukraine's accession can be still overcome, and how? And is there a plan B on it?
You want to start? Yeah. Well, so first of all, it is very important to acknowledge that Ukraine is doing complicated, hard and complex reforms while fighting a war for their survival. This is impressive to see how fast they are moving forward. And I want to be very clear. We have agreed in our accession process that the accession process is merits-based. It's not a political process where you can take shortcuts or leapfrog forward. It's a merits-based process. The Commission has affirmed that Ukraine deserves all the merits to move on to open the first cluster. So therefore, this is now intense talks going on, that we stick to our own principles, that is a merits-based process.
First of all member states, by unanimity, decided to open these negotiations on 2022 and approve this process. Then the negotiation is ongoing process. Is a negotiation who takes time, and we cannot waste time. Then we don't need to stop. Nobody needs to be blocked. We can continue working. Until now, in this such difficult situation, the truth is Ukraine is delivering, making the reforms, and the assessment from the European Commission is very clear. Ukraine is doing very well, and we should continue the negotiations. Then I invite the Commission, I invite Ukraine to continue your work. You cannot waste time, because we need to conclude this, and when it comes the moment to take a decision, we have already done what we need to do to obtain the approval. And as you know, one member state believes that the session could be only when we achieve a just and lasting peace in Ukraine. And of course, all of us are fighting and supporting Ukraine to achieve a just and lasting peace as soon as possible. And in the meantime, we need to do what in any case we need to do, is to negotiate, to deliver the reforms, to evaluate the reforms, to have and this is what we are doing. That we don't need to stop. We don't need to say that we are blocked. No, we are working, and the working is going on.
I think, Antonio, if I may say, invitation accepted.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. That will conclude the press conference. Thank you.
Can I ask you one question? Everybody wants peace in Ukraine. How can the Danish presidency help you in this?
To strengthen us, as you did before. Thank you. Thank them.
Man kan også køre ind på andre steder, men jeg ved det jo ikke.
human rights in our country. Killings, deportations, torture, sexual violence, unlawful detentions, and executions have become widespread phenomenon. The civilian population is the main target. Russia systematically shells civilian infrastructure. People are killed and injured daily because of the aggression of Russian Federation. Among them are innocent children. That is why I call on the Office of the High Commissioner and the monitoring mission to continue and strengthen their efforts to protect human rights in Ukraine, namely, to highlight in reports the systematic shelling of civilian infrastructure and other crimes committed by the aggressor state, to conduct monitoring visits to places of illegal detention on the territory of Russia and demand access to them, to urge stronger international diplomatic and sanctions pressure on Russia to stop the crimes. Human rights must be protected and international humanitarian law must be respected.
Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you very much indeed. War Resisters International is next.
WRI, together with its partner Connection EV, expresses its solidarity with the people of Ukraine suffering from the military aggression of the Russian Federation and call for an immediate ceasefire and peace negotiation. We raise concerns about the Russian Federation forcibly imposing military registration conscription in occupied territories, pressuring civilians to sign military contracts, and indoctrinating children militaristically. In Crimea, 4 Jehovah's Witnesses have been imprisoned, and illegal mobilization produced over 500 criminal cases. Russian soldiers mobilized in the self-proclaimed republics in eastern Ukraine are unable to refuse military service. In the event of desertion, they face criminal prosecution in Russia and suspicion of treason from the Ukrainian side. As a result, they have virtually no opportunity to apply for asylum in a safe country, and their relocation is nearly impossible. In Ukraine, there are still no effective procedures for conscience objection claims and exemption from military duty. 15 prisoners of conscience detained in prisons and military units, as reported by ECHO, should be released. An objector accused of draft evasion acquitted. The lack of recognition of the human right to conscience objection has also been reported in the OHCHR periodic report, as well as 8 cases of torture and ill treatment of conscience objectors and pressure by military recruiters on members of the legal profession. We urge the full implementation of the human right to refuse military service. We hope the Constitutional Court of Ukraine will promptly satisfy complaints of conscience objectors Dmitry Zelensky and Vitaly Alexeyenko and acquit Vitaly Krushenko. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I give the floor to Conscience and Peace Tax International, CPTI.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chairman. Madam ASG, while upholding Ukraine in the face of continued Russian aggression, what can its friends do to persuade it to adhere to its own human rights obligations? We await anxiously the Constitutional Court decision on the complaint lodged by Dmytro Zelensky regarding the non-availability during martial law of alternative civilian service for conscientious objectors to military service, on which hinges nothing less than a right which inheres in the freedom of thought, conscience and religion guaranteed by the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and which, as we have heard already, is also being disregarded by Russia. In March this year, over a dozen Ukrainian conscientious objectors were under sentence of 3 years' imprisonment for their refusal of military service. No less than 182 further cases were currently before the courts, and more than 500 criminal investigations were underway on Jehovah's Witnesses alone. Other objectors, having been forcibly recruited, were facing even harsher military penalties for disobedience. Unless the Constitutional Court halts this trend, as we fervently hope it does, the number of imprisoned objectors will by the end of the year be in the hundreds. This, we must point out, would constitute a repression of minority beliefs on almost a Russian scale. Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. I now give the floor to World Federation of Ukrainian Women's Organizations.
We thank the High Commissioner and the Secretary General for the reports. We are gravely concerned about the continued and massive aerial attacks on Ukraine by the Russian Federation. The intensified use of long-range missiles and systematic drone strikes have led to a dramatic 50% increase in civilian casualties this year. We condemn in the strongest of terms these actions, including the deliberate targeting of residential areas and civilian infrastructure, transportation networks, and emergency and rescue services. Widespread and systematic use of enforced disappearances and torture in occupied territories must stop. The international community and this Council must intensify efforts to secure the release of all Ukrainian civilians unlawfully detained. Currently, 37,000 Ukrainians are registered missing, and 16,000 Ukrainian civilians are known to be detained by Russia, though the actual number is likely much higher. Many have been held for years without trial, subjected to torture, inhumane conditions, and unlawful transfer to the Russian Federation. The tragic case of Ukrainian journalist Viktoria Roshchina, who died in Russian captivity, showing clear signs of torture, underscores the urgency of international action. The detention of civilians is a grave violation of international law. We stress that civilians must not be included in prisoner exchanges. They must be released immediately and unconditionally. Continued efforts are necessary to ensure access to occupied territories for the monitoring of human rights. We fully support the position of the government of Ukraine in its efforts to negotiate a ceasefire and a just and lasting peace, as well as the recent establishment of a special tribunal for the crime of aggression against Ukraine. All those responsible for the crime of aggression and war crimes must be brought to justice. Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. I now give the floor to Human Rights Research League.
Thank you, Mr. President. Human Rights Research League is appalled by Russia's ongoing aggression, and as a Ukrainian journalist and human rights advocate myself, I must speak out against the horrific crimes committed by Russia in its war against Ukraine. These acts are crimes against humanity. One of the most disturbing perpetrations is Russia's systematic kidnapping of Ukrainian children from occupied territories. The children are taken from orphanages or separated from their parents and guardians, transported to Russia, stripped of their identities, and illegally adopted. This is a state-sponsored child trafficking. The ICC issued arrest warrants for war crimes for key state actors in Russia involved in these abductions. These crimes may also amount to genocide by erasing Ukrainian identity. The brutality extends to Ukrainian civilians abducted, tortured, and killed in Russian captivity. The recent murder of journalist Viktoria Roshchina, tortured and mutilated in captivity, is heartbreaking. Ukrainian prisoners of war face torture, starvation, execution, in violation of the Geneva Conventions. These abuses are systemic and approved by Russia's leadership. We stand with survivors and families demanding justice and action. The international community must hold Russia accountable, not just for past crimes, but for the ongoing aggression. Russia's war must not continue unchallenged. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you very much indeed. Human Rights House Foundation is next.
Thank you. We welcome the Secretary General's report and its detailed focus on the deteriorating situation in Crimea. Over a decade of occupation has produced a near total collapse of civic space in Crimea and what our partner, the Crimean Human Rights Group, calls a prison for the residents of the occupied territory. Our partner ZMINA documented at least 47 new cases of pressure on professional and citizen journalists in Crimea between May 2024 and May 2025. 17 journalists remain political prisoners, among them Irina Danilovich, Remzi Bakirov, Ahmed Suleimanov, and Timur Ibrahimov require urgent care. Mr. Bakirov is repeatedly confined to a punishment cell. We call for his immediate release. Human rights lawyers and defenders are likewise targeted. Recent searches and disbarments of Crimean Tatar lawyers and the closure or sanctioning of independent media exemplify Russia's deliberate dismantling of fundamental freedoms of expression, association, and assembly. We further note with alarm the Secretary General's documentation of forced conscription and indoctrination of children, mass confiscation of property from Ukrainians who refuse Russian citizenship, and the continued denial of OHCHR and other independent monitors access to Crimea. We highlight the report's findings that such persecution is systematic, and our Ukrainian partners now make a clear case for such persecution as amounting to a potential crime against humanity. Madam Vice President, we ask the High Commissioner whether there are any remedies or reparations for the mass confiscation of property of Ukrainians in Crimea. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Civicus is next.
Mr. President, Civicus and the Center for Civil Liberties welcomes the reports of the Secretary General and the update of the High Commissioner. We remain concerned about the massive and systematic human rights violations in Crimea, including political persecution of dissent, destruction of independent media, censorship, closure of religious organizations, and discrimination against the Crimean Tatar people by the indigenous people of the peninsula. Since the occupation, the Center has been keeping reports of civil society actors and human rights defenders facing reprisals for their non-violent activities in defense of human rights. Many have been subjected to enforced disappearances, arbitrary arrest, torture, sexual and gender-based violence, and unlawful imprisonment on fabricated criminal charges, including Crimean Tatar activists, cultural leaders, journalists, and volunteers on the peninsula. We also remain gravely concerned about the forced mobilization of Ukrainian citizens into the Russian army and the relentless militarization of Crimea, as well as about the forcible displacement policy to substitute the population in Crimea with citizens of the Russian Federation. We urge states to make human rights violations and abuses occurring in occupied Crimea more visible, to support civil society with flexible and long-term funding, and to support the extension and adequate funding of international investigative efforts to ensure accountability for crimes against civil society.
Thank you very much indeed. I now give the floor for a joint statement to Lawyers for Lawyers.
Lawyers Rights Watch Canada, the International Bar Association Human Rights Institute, Frontline Defenders and the Council of Bars and Law Societies in Europe remain deeply concerned about the ongoing persecution of lawyers in occupied Crimea. Those representing Crimean Tatars, Ukrainians, and civil society actors in politically sensitive cases are systematically harassed, threatened, and prosecuted. Their homes and offices are raided, access declines in case material is obstructed, and their licenses revoked, effectively preventing them from defending political prisoners. Bar associations under the occupying authorities no longer function independently. Disciplinary bodies are routinely weaponized to interfere with lawyers' work, often at the direct request of the Russian Ministry of Justice. These politically motivated proceedings lack due process and gravely violate international standards on the independence of the legal profession. This has led to the disbarment of lawyers Lilia Hametsi, Rustem Kianev, Natsim Shakhmambutov, and Alexei Ladin, all targeted for their legitimate work. Such harassment, along with arbitrary sanctions like fines, administrative detention, and unlawful surveillance, has deterred other lawyers from taking up certain cases, making access to independent legal representation virtually impossible, as reflected in the UN Secretary General's report. We urge this Council to call for independent review of all disbarment cases in Crimea and other occupied territories of Ukraine, demand reinstatement of unjustly revoked licenses, and publicly condemn the misuse of legal tools to punish lawyers and human rights defenders. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I give the floor to Ingénieur du Monde.
Mr. President, 1,226. That is how many days Ukraine has endured Russia's brutal and unlawful invasion. Each passing day not only claims more innocent lives, but it deepens the failure of this Council to uphold its mandate. The findings in this report by the Secretary General are abhorrent and demand immediate action by member states. Mr. President, the testimonies in this report reveal that both Ukrainian civilians and prisoners of war are being raped and sexually assaulted at the hands of Russian forces. The UN has documented Ukrainian civilians dying in Russian custody after being tortured, abused, and denied even the most basic principles under international law. Ukrainian children have been stolen from their homes and transferred to Russia. Their whereabouts remain unknown as Russian authorities obstruct the efforts of the Red Cross. Meanwhile, inside Russia and across the territories it illegally occupies, fundamental freedoms of expression are under siege. Ukrainian identity is criminalized. Mr. President, the international community can no longer remain idle. Russia's aggression is not only a war on Ukraine, it is a war on human rights, on accountability, and on the very principles this Council was created to defend. 1,226 days. How many more before this Council takes decisive action? Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much indeed. And I give the floor to the Next Century Foundation.
Distinguished members, the Next Century Foundation wishes to express its grave concern over the growing use of autonomous technologies in warfare. Through the conduct of the Ukraine war, we have seen a troubling rise in drone systems and artificial intelligence used in targeting and operations. Though often justified by efficiency or precision, these tools have diminished accountability and normalized remote, dehumanized conflict. Inexpensive drones have been proven highly effective in halting vehicles. Their use against individual soldiers, however, raises serious ethical concerns. These troops often have no means of defence or chance to surrender, rendering them helpless. Using such weapons in this context can be seen as disproportionate, making the battlefield deadlier for individuals. We recognise that drones and autonomous weaponry can keep combatants out of direct harm's way, and that efficiency in warfare has its place. However, the dangers of detached warfare necessitate urgent regulation. We urge the group of governmental experts to conclude formal discussions on the regulation of autonomous weapons and provide clear guidance to nations on their use through an addition to the Convention on certain conventional weapons covering AI and drones. We also urge states to follow these guidelines. The wielders of these weapons have a responsibility to act accordingly. Clear international norms are needed to protect civilians, uphold humanitarian law, and prevent a future where machines fight with little human control. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you very much indeed. This was the last speaker we could accommodate in this dialogue. May I now give the floor to Ms. Brandskaris to make her concluding observations. You have the floor, Madam.
Madam Vice President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I thank you very much for this very engaged discussion and statements, and including the many questions as well that we have received. I will attempt to cluster a little bit and answer them as far as time permits. And let me just say that while we actually were having this dialogue, the sirens went off in Kiev once again, only to show the urgency of this dialogue that we are having. Many questions centered around, and comments as well, centered around accountability. So I will start there. I will not list all the member states who had the questions. You know, you heard them all, but it was obviously a very prominent focus of many of them. We will, of course, continue to call the international community to pursue a just and sustainable peace, and that in line, as we all know, should be in line with the UN Charter and international law, and that includes the diplomacy and dialogue that we will return to. But justice and accountability for those very grave violations and war crimes committed in Ukraine that we have been discussing and that are in the reports, including in occupied territory, are of course indispensable for achieving lasting peace. And that includes ensuring accountability for all serious grave violations of human rights and humanitarian law, including conflict-related sexual violence that many of you mentioned as well. The mechanisms for justice and accountability have to have a victim-centered approach, and they should promote truth, justice, reparations as we at its center. So we encourage very much the international community to continue the efforts to support law enforcement efforts, to document, to investigate, utilizing a survivor-centered approach, and to adapt assistance to the survivors who have varying needs so that it is a targeted assistance. There is a significant number of men survivors that should also be taken into account when planning assistance programs. The capacity of Ukrainian institutions and the need to strengthen them remains on the agenda. The capacity to investigate and to prosecute violations of human rights and international humanitarian law in accordance, of course, with international standards. And that is in order to contribute to the accountability and to reinforce the independence of Ukraine's judiciary system and the rule of law in this regard. The international community should also help Ukraine to put in place measures to rebuild communities, facilitate the reintegration of persons who lived under occupation, and to foster social cohesion. And that is looking forward. We will come back very briefly to that part of the questions that some of you had as well. The human rights mechanisms documenting violations need to receive the support and the funds that also need to be there, at the adequate necessary levels, and that includes, of course, also our own Office of the High Commissioner's monitoring mission in Ukraine and the Commission of Inquiry as well. There's a continued engagement with and support for international accountability mechanisms, including the International Criminal Court. That is also important. And of course the role of all those who are engaged. Many mentioned also both the stress that civil society is under, but also the role that they need to have and the support they need to have in this regard. The access to occupied territories was mentioned several times, and there was a specific question as well, so that in this regard it is not new, but we regret that the Russian Federation continues to deny the Office of the High Commissioner access to the occupied territory and to the Russian Federation. We, of course, continue and will continue to consistently request access in our communication with the Russian Federation, and we have also, as you will have seen, raised this issue in the public reporting that has been done. So meanwhile, while we don't have the access, we certainly remain committed to doing the monitoring and reporting on the human rights situation in the occupied territory. This is done in an independent way. It is done in an impartial way. We have, and I have mentioned, as has the High Commissioner and our other OHCHR colleagues many times, that OHCHR has a standard rigorous methodology for monitoring overall, and it includes also a methodology for remote monitoring. That means gathering and verifying information from using different sources. That includes witnesses, it includes victims, it includes satellite imagery, open source materials, but also information made available by the state authorities, but also by the occupation authorities. The issues concerning the occupied territory itself, there were questions on remedies and reparations, in particular also referring to the confiscation of property of Ukrainians, also referring specifically to Crimea, but of course there are broader issues here. We know that the Russian Federation has taken significant steps to expropriate private property in occupied territory of Ukraine. Clearly that is in violation of international humanitarian law. Some recent confiscations have occurred mainly in Donetsk, Kherson and Luhansk regions, but those practices began already in 2014 in Crimea, where property was sold or provided to Russian citizens and military personnel without compensation to the original owners, residents of Crimea. So in Ukraine, individuals whose property was damaged or destroyed in government-controlled territory after 2022 have access to compensation. In December 2024, the Ukrainian parliament adopted a law on compensation for property lost in occupied territory, including through confiscation, but this law has not been signed by the president and therefore has not entered into force. But that's on the Ukrainian side. And several of you mentioned on the international level, the Council of Europe established, preceding the tribunal that was referred to, there is a registry of damage to serve as a record of damage, loss and injury caused by aggression of the Russian Federation. And these mechanisms, of course, cover property confiscated by the occupation authorities, but to the properties that were lost after 24th of February 2022 specifically. So we call on the Russian Federation certainly to refrain from confiscating private property in occupied territory, and we encourage the international community as well as Ukraine to include people who lost their property in the occupied territory before 2022 in all compensation and reparation measures in order to ensure also the equal treatment of victims in this regard. For other issues, and there were issues concerning identity on occupied territory by several questions that were put there, in particular also the preservation of identity under the conditions of occupation. We have indeed, as an office, documented a systematic suppression of Ukrainian culture, language and identity in the occupied territory of Ukraine. Those are violations, very clear violations of an occupying power's obligations under international humanitarian law. And this, of course, is consistent in all cases. This and other violations of humanitarian law, we have the focus on the obligations of an occupying power, of course, is also in all situations where occupations are taking place. So beyond the legal implications, they also have clearly very long-term consequences. There is the social fabric issue itself, the destruction of society, of communities themselves, the fragmentation and the threat to the identities, the Ukrainian identity, community identities, the cultural heritage that risks being lost, as well as linguistic diversity, which of course we should all cherish. But this was also, many of you or several of you mentioned particularly the focus on children and youth as well. So I think this is something we need to focus on. There is a potential long-term and intergenerational effect on this pressure on Ukrainian identity and culture itself and language that needs attention. There's a climate of fear, of repression. The social divisions, of course, will only increase from those kinds of tensions, and that clearly makes any future reconciliation or reintegration much more complicated. So we encourage very much the international community to support civil society and cultural organizations to work on all of these issues and the support for Ukrainian culture and language on the occupied territory. There was a particular question concerning children, and of course in that context of education, very importantly also for that support to be targeted and to maintain also these aspects of cultural identity. And that, of course, would include also those civil society organizations that are active outside of the occupied territory, so that language, history, traditions, and other parts of identity can be preserved. We also encourage the international community to engage with the Russian Federation to urge that full compliance, as many of you did today, with international humanitarian human rights law and the implementation of the recommendations that the Office of the High Commissioner is making and that we have in the reports presented today. And there needs to be a strong international support for the accountability mechanisms as well. I already touched on that, but I would stress that that includes both international and domestic accountability measures. We have to have justice for victims and lay also the foundation as a step towards the foundation for long-term reconciliation, again with taking into account the culture. I feel that I am coming to an end of what I can say, so I will be very quick on this one, because there's just the use of children, if I may I will really cut to just one sentence, but the use of children, Ukrainian children, by Russia in the context of the war of aggression is a very important issue. Many of you focused on it. We continue to very closely follow this, and also the impact in general of the ongoing conflict of children in Ukraine. Clearly, that is an issue of well-being, on the safety of children and their fundamental rights. As we know, for children, it is the interest of the child that needs to be at the center of how children are dealt with. We have
stand by. Please stand by. Screen up and play one. Preset 6 now.
Nej, nu er jeg lige parret med den der.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure. Great pleasure. Okay. Now, congratulations.
both of us. Yeah, yeah. Vos Majestés, le roi et la reine, Vos Excellences, Messieurs, dames, les ministres, Messieurs, dames, chers invités, soyez tous les bienvenus ici à Aarhus. Your Majesties, the King and the Queen, Your Excellencies, Ministers, ladies and gentlemen, dear guests, welcome to Aarhus. And welcome to this official opening ceremony for the Danish presidency of the Council of the European Union. My name is Stephanie Suruk. I am a news correspondent for Denmark. I'm half French, half Danish, so fully European and fully grateful to guide you through this evening. Tonight, we mark a significant moment. Denmark assumes the presidency of the Council of the European Union for the 8th time of our history. It's an honor, and it's an honor that comes at a particularly critical time. Europe today is facing some of the most complex and serious challenges in recent history, from geopolitical uncertainties to a growing pressure on our shared values and global partnerships.
And it's in times like these that unity, cooperation and open dialogue are more essential than ever. And it's in that spirit that we gather here tonight. And what better place to begin this new chapter than right here in the city of smiles. Yes, that is what we Danes call the city of Aarhus, the city of smiles, and for a good reason. Tonight we are having the honor of being inside of this beautiful Aarhus City Hall, designed by the world-renowned Danish architect Arne Jacobsen. It's a true architectural gem, right here in the heart of a city that is known for, yes, its smiles, but also its energy, its optimism, and its European spirit. In fact, just outside this building, a European street festival is taking place. So if you happen to hear some loud cheers during this evening, don't worry, it's a party and it's ours. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it's my great honor to invite the Prime Minister of Denmark to the stage. Please welcome Ms. Mette Frederiksen.
Your Majesties, Your Excellencies, and ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I am honored to see all of you here in wonderful Aarhus. If you look around, you see the work of, as just been said, one of our most famous architects, Arne Jacobsen. This beautiful city hall was built during the Second World War, in the darkest hour of modern European history. Back then, there was a lack of materials. Iron bands in the right size for the construction of the roof were not available. So what did the craftsmen do? Did they wait for the war to end? No. They collected small pieces of iron from all over Denmark. And they put all these pieces together to form the strong iron bands holding the roof together. Even in the most difficult times, we can build something great and beautiful. But only if we join forces and put together all the small pieces. Right now, Europe is facing the greatest challenges since the 1940s. Russia's brutal war against Ukraine, democratic elections targeted by foreign powers, pressure on Europe's external borders for migration, global economic uncertainty. Today, it is clear peace and stability on our continent cannot be taken for granted. The world order that we build together is trembling, and our security and our way of living is under pressure. The past 6 months have shown that Greenland and Denmark can rely on European family and friends when the storm hits us. The unity of Europe is real, and Europe can be strong when need is. Ladies and gentlemen, you represent decision makers, companies, unions, youth associations, and the press. To address the challenges Europe faces, all at the same time, we need every one of you, not only to defend the interest of your stakeholders, but to take on responsibility and to join efforts to build a stronger Europe. Dear Ursula and dear Antonio, all construction projects need architects with visions. And we are lucky to have you in the forefront, drawing up the way forward. And during our presidency, Denmark is ready to support both of you. First of all, we need to pave the way for a much stronger European defence. Russia has converted into a war economy, and I see no signs that Putin's imperial dreams stop with Ukraine. If we as Europeans, if we are not willing to defend ourselves, then what is Europe? It was a grave mistake to cash in the peace dividend. A big mistake. For too long we spent too little, and we must never repeat that again. We have to rearm ourselves. We have to scale up our defence industry. We have to break down barriers and obstacles in our way. And as presidency, we will push for common ground on how to get there. Europe must be able to defend ourselves no later than 2030. And here we need to look to our Ukrainian friends. Dear Volodymyr, right now, European security rests far too much on the shoulders of your brave countrymen and women. You are fighting for your own country, and you are fighting for the rest of Europe. We cannot and we will not lay you down. We must We must continue our steadfast support for Ukraine and increase the pressure on Russia with more sanctions. We need to look at our support to Ukraine in a different way. We have to change our mindset. Our donations are not charity. They are a part of our defence of our common continent, of Europe, of our life and our freedom. And we need to learn from Ukraine. Your determination, your sense of urgency, and your ability to innovate. In only a couple of years, Ukraine has built an incredible defence industry. Now we must show that we can do the same in the rest of Europe, and we don't have a single second to waste. Secondly, building a strong Europe is also about migration. Right now, cynical smugglers have the power to decide who can enter Europe and who cannot. We need, of course, to be in control with our own borders. Who can enter and stay in our countries, that needs to be a democratic decision. Many come here to work and to contribute, but some do not. And around Europe, we now see the consequences: crime, radicalisation and terror. We have built some of the most and best societies ever, but we cannot accept anyone who wants to come here. Those that commit serious crimes, they should be expelled. We need to address these challenges. We need to address them head on, take firm action on migration and criminal foreign nationals. because this is all about ensuring that our societies and our citizens are safe. Third, we need to build a stronger Europe economically. European companies should have the best opportunities to succeed in the global markets, to create jobs of the future here in Europe. We must cut red tape and remove burdens, reduce our dependencies, bring Europe forward in a just way for all of our citizens. And while others build tariff walls, we should build new partnerships. Get Mercosur rolling, finalise an agreement with India, not just for the sake of trade, but also for the sake of building strong alliances in a very uncertain world, without ever compromising what makes Europe special: our social model, our cities where people can live and work, our green leadership. And this is a message for all the commissioners. We need to see the green transition as key to our competitiveness, our independence, especially from Russia, our future. We need to combat climate change and adapt to the dramatic changes that we already see. Floods, storms, but it is not only a matter of fighting climate change. It's not only a matter of creating more and better lives in our cities, not only a matter of strengthening our society. It's all at once and with no time to lose. That is why it is key that we need to set a long-term EU climate target for 2040. It is hard to believe, but Russia remains the second largest exporter of gas to the European Union. Every cent we send to Russia is a support for Russia's war machine. We cannot continue paying them, killing Europeans. We need to work hard to end all import of Russian gas. At the same time, we must bring down our energy costs and roll out clean energy and infrastructure at a level we have never seen before, for ourselves, but also for our children and grandchildren. Ladies and gentlemen, I have trust in Europe, a Europe that will no longer seek shelter behind others, a Europe that is ready to stand up for ourselves, defend ourselves, a Europe standing proud. Let's go to work. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam Prime Minister, for those inspiring words. And now it's my pleasure to invite the President of the European Council to deliver his remarks. Please welcome Mr. Antoniò Costa to the stage.
Your Majesties, dear Mette, dear Volodymyr, dear Ursula, of course, dear Mayor of Eros, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the start of a new rotating presidency is a moment of renewed energy. Rotating presidencies play an essential role in ensuring national ownership of the European Union. They serve an excellent reminder that our Union is composed of 27 distinct national sensitivities, cultures and interests. The motto of the Danish presidency is a strong Europe in a changing world. Under your leadership, dear Mette, I am confident that we will continue to make Europe more secure, more competitive, the two main priorities of the Danish presidency. Let me begin with security, because without it, all other ambitions falter. A secure Europe is not a slogan, it is a duty to protect our citizens, uphold our values and defend our future. NATO is indispensable. At the same time, the European Union is assuming greater responsibility in building a common European defence system that deters aggressions. That is why we are working hard to achieve defence readiness by 2030, boosting our capabilities, investing better collectively, more rationally and efficiently, combining different financial tools. Denmark is a leader of European security, and it is setting an example in its steadfast support to Ukraine, militarily and financially, on reconstruction and boosting the Ukrainian defence industry with direct procurement under the so-called, but very purpose-called, Danish model. Together, we will continue to stand firmly by Ukraine with long-term support and a clear path to the European Union membership. Because enlargement is not a bureaucratic process. It is a strategic investment in peace, stability, and our shared European future. In fact, it is the European Union's best geopolitical investment. And I know we can count on the Danish presidency to push forward the negotiations with Ukraine and also Moldova and the 6 Western Balkans countries. The second pillar of your presidency is economic competitiveness. Both pillars reinforce each other. A more competitive Europe is a safer Europe, and a Europe with a more robust defence industry will be a more autonomous, innovative and technological Europe. Indeed, we need an European Union that leads in innovation, delivers prosperity and good quality jobs, and attracts talent. Trade is a fundamental component of this effort. That is why the European Union needs to continue its ambitious fair trade agenda with partners all over the world. The core of our economic strength, the European Union's economic superpower, is the single market. But it must be modernized and deepened. We need to simplify the rules that govern our businesses and cut red tape. We are doing that already, and we need to redouble our efforts. Competitiveness and green transition, as you said, are two sides of the same coin. Actually, the green transition is Europe's chance to lead, to create clean jobs, attract investments, and reinforce our energy security and our economic resilience. Denmark has a very strong record in these fields, and we count on the Danish presidency to take this work forward in preparation of the successful COP30 in Brazil in November. In a nutshell, we need to invest in defence to ensure peace. We need a more competitive Europe to ensure prosperity for our citizens, leaving no one behind. And we need to fight climate change to preserve our existential security. All three of these priorities are interconnected. To deliver on all of them, we must prepare a long-term budget that matches our ambitions. A budget that equips us to act decisively, together, as Europe, in the more volatile world. Advancing the budget discussion will be a key task for the Danish presidency, ahead of a leaders' discussion in December. These tasks will require skillful and creative negotiations. And who better than Denmark, global leaders in creative design and architecture, to take them forward. Dear friends, excellencies, as the Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard once said, life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards. Today, as we look ahead, we must also learn from Europe's past, a past that tells us that solidarity and cooperation is our greatest strength, a past that tells us that our common future depends on our determination. And I know, dear Mette, that determination is your middle name. In Euros, where democracy, climate leadership, and openness interest, it is fitting to reaffirm our shared commitment to a European Union that protects, to an European Union that prospers, to an European Union that leads. Together with you, Mette, with you, dear Ursula, I'm sure we will be a Team Europe that delivers for our citizens. Thank you and best wishes for a successful Danish presidency. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those words, Mr. President. And now it's my honor to invite the President of the European Commission to share her reflections with us. Please give a warm welcome to Ursula von der Leyen.
Your Majesties, Prime Minister dear Mette, President Zelensky, dear Volodymyr, my dear friend Antonio, Mr. Mayor, esteemed hosts, ladies and gentlemen. Indeed, there is no more fitting setting to mark the start of Denmark's presidency than this remarkable building, designed by one of your great 20th century's visionaries, Arne Jacobsen. This building is not only a work of art, but also a triumph of function. It captures what makes Denmark so special: the ability to blend style and practicability, to unite tradition with modernity, to stand strong and independent. Aarhus embodies those same values. Gothic spires rise beside biotech labs. Green innovation flourishes next to cobbled streets. It is a city rooted in history, yet fully focused on the future. I cannot think of a better place to discuss the way forward for our union. Prime Minister dear Mette, I remember the speech you gave at the closing of the Danish Parliament last May. You said something powerful, yet simple. You said, Europe is here. And that is so true. And today we deliver on the promise of this Danish presidency to build a strong Europe in a changing world. One that can stand on its own and deliver for the people of Europe. And that starts with Ukraine. Dear President, my friend Volodymyr, Europe continues to stand by your side. We maintain our financial support across all fronts, militarily, economically, and politically. We continue to put pressure on Russia and will soon deliver the 18th rounds of sanctions. And we will continue to move forward with your accession process, because Ukraine's future is at the heart of the European Union. Ladies and gentlemen, we know that a strong Europe relies on a strong economy, on leading in technologies of tomorrow, and creating new jobs and opportunities. Here in Denmark and Aarhus, you are showing the way. From offshore wind to green hydrogen, from design to pharma, from artificial intelligence to aerospace, Danish companies are not just thriving, you are showing how we can lead in the sustainable economy of tomorrow. And crucially, you are building on the foundation of your social market economy, one that combines competitiveness with protection, that shows how governments, business and citizens can work together for the common good. And this is the essence of the European way. A society that protects its people, but also enables them to take risks, to adapt and to succeed. This is the model we must strengthen, so that Europe does not only respond to change, but shapes it. Ladies and gentlemen, to build a stronger Europe, we need courage and we need optimism. And nowhere is that optimism more alive than here in Aarhus. The Smiletsby, the city of smiles indeed. A city where over half the population is under 30. A city where heritage meets a high-tech future. So let us begin this presidency with the energy of Aarhus, with the clarity of Arne Jacobsen, and with the courage of the Danes that our times demand. I look forward to working very closely with you in the months ahead, my dear Mette. Thank you very much to all Danes, and long live Europe.
Thank you so much for those words, Madam President. And now, dear guests, it's my great honor to welcome to the stage His Excellency Mr. Volodymyr Zelensky, the President of Ukraine.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Your Majesties, thanks so much. And dear Mette, my friend, thank you so much for the invitation. Such a beautiful city, such a strong people. Thank you for your support. Thanks. And of course, dear Ursula, dear Antonio, all of our friends, colleagues. Once again, congratulations to Denmark, our close friend, personally Mette, along with your team, as Denmark begins its presidency of the EU Council. We can be confident this will be a time of strong and principled decisions. And that means a time of predictability. Predictability has become a rare thing these days. But Denmark is a country that leaves no room for doubt. It's a country and a people we can rely on. Denmark brings a sense of predictability. And you keep your promises, and together we achieve meaningful results. Thank you for that. And I also want to thank our friends leading the EU institutions, Антонио and Ursula. Even on such symbolic days like the start of the presidency, we don't stop at symbolism. We make real decisions. it's important. We talked about how important it's to close the gaps in defense funding. We are working to get real results from our joint defense programs, and we are getting things ready so that EU can keep its promises. Ukraine is ready to open the accession clusters, ready to move forward with the negotiations, and ready for decisions that benefit both sides. Thank you for your support. Ladies and gentlemen, we in Ukraine created a special national award for children. I told this story today to Metro, and it's for boys and girls who have shown bravery during Russian attacks or helped in other dangerous situations, volunteered or shown civic leadership. The award is called The Future of Ukraine, and truly our future depends on whether we can raise children who care, who are not indifferent to others, who are willing to help. As this visit began, I had an honor of presenting this award to a boy who lives here in Denmark, and he's a Danish citizen. His name is Jens, and he's just 11 years old, like my son. But his kindness, he's 11, but his kindness and care have already made a difference and inspired many adults. Jens made Easter crafts in blue and yellow, Ukraine's national colors, sold them and bought backpacks to send that to Ukrainian children who really need help. And it was deeply moving. But if you think about it, this was also deeply political. Wanting to help, to support others, to not stay on the sidelines in a time of war. That's a powerful message in itself. And this is exactly the kind of message that lies at the heart of the European Union, at the heart of our unity. We are united and we work together, and our Europe needs the EU for mutual support, for shared protection, and for the very values shown by Jens, by you and by millions of Europeans every day: compassion, sincerity, and the will to help someone in need, even if that person is far from your home. And we must not forget this. All our European institutions, all our agreements, all our cooperation and joint work for security is all built around this idea that Europeans care for one another and act like human beings in this fullest sense of the word. This is why we need the European Union. And this is why we must defend Europe, not only from outside enemies, but also from those inside who try to replace solidarity with division, and compassion with a cold disregard for anyone but themselves. Dear friends, the next 6 months of Denmark's EU presidency will go by fast. Time always flies. The most important thing is that we achieve what we all truly want. First, we need to protect the EU from those who are trying to break it apart, often for personal and corrupt reasons. The EU must stay strong because it gives strength to every European nation in global competition. And the EU must keep its promises, especially when it comes to enlargement. And I hope that during Denmark's presidency, the EU accession negotiations with Ukraine will move forward and the clusters will finally be open. Second, we all understand that Russia is not just some dangerous neighbor. That much is obvious. It's something more deliberate, an anti-European project. Everyone in Europe can clearly see this. Russia invests in everything that goes against our European way of life. That's why we must not let them win, not in this war, and not in any part of our future. We need biting sanctions against Russia. We need steady defense support for Ukraine. We need to build up Europe's own defense industry so that Russia cannot outmatch us in any area. All of this is vital for keeping Europe safe. And we have to keep putting pressure on Russia to make them stop the war, respect their neighbors, and choose peace. As long as Russia gets a high price for its oil, it keeps fighting. That's why we need a strict price cap. As long as Russia finds ways to buy parts and equipment for weapons, it keeps killing. That's why we need a full stop to all supplies to Russia of anything that is or could be used for making weapons. It's high time we established an efficient international platform to control dual-use exports, and it could be one of the achievements of the Danish presidency. We can work on it together, and we need to cut off Putin and his buddies from money. As long as Russian banks can still operate in Europe and other key parts of the world, Russia keeps ignoring diplomacy. We must push it back toward diplomacy. Third, even if it's not easy, we must do everything we can to keep cooperation between Europe and the United States strong. Yes, Europe should rely more on itself, especially when it comes to defense and protecting our people. But it's always better to be in an alliance than in disagreement. So the next 6 months should bring real progress to protect our partnerships and make our cooperation stronger. No matter what anyone says, Europe is and will stay one of the world's strongest players and a leader in human rights. Europe must also become a global leader in technology, especially in defense technologies. That's a key goal. And most importantly, Europe must be a continent of peace. Let's use the next 6 months to make the right decisions, especially for that. Thank you. Slava Ukraini!
Thank you so much.
You know, he graduated from this university. Yeah. From exactly this. Coming home. Coming home. Yeah, it makes sense. I would get all of it. Yes.